What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Trevor Steele with Backcountry PPG, and today's video is all about the brand new Ozone Roadster 4. This is the newest, latest, and greatest out of Ozone Paramotors, and it is the new version of the very popular Ozone Roadster 3. In today's video, I want to give you my thoughts on the Roadster 4 versus the Roadster 3 versus other competing gliders in that class of wings. I also want to show you some interviews we did with pilots with a variety of different skill levels, trying the Roadster 4 versus what they typically fly. The goal of this video is simple: be as transparent, as honest as possible. The elephant in the room with review videos is that if you promote a glider, if you sell a glider, if you represent the brand that you are reviewing, a lot of people view that as a very biased, unworthy review. The goal is to truly show you what we've seen is different from the Roadster 4 to the Roadster 3. With all of that being said, let's get right into it. To start off, I want to talk a little bit about glider weight and compare it to some other gliders on the marketplace so you have something to reference. The Roadster 3 24 meter, all of the following gliders I'm going to talk about are in the 24 meter size. The Roadster 3 weighed 11.7 pounds. The new Ozone Roadster 4 weighs the exact same 11.7 pounds. The Ozone Spider 3 weighs 9.7 pounds. So with all of that information, the Roadster 4 is the exact same weight as the Roadster 3. Now, for whatever reason, I thought the Roadster 4 had different fabric. It felt a little bit different. It looked a little bit different from the Roadster 3, and it is the exact same fabric, top and bottom, as the Roadster 3. I want to roll this into the launching characteristics, as that is one of the things that Ozone does so well is their launching. Right off the bat, I would go as far as saying that I think the Ozone Roadster 4 launches about as good as a Spider 3. It might even launch a little bit easier than even smaller Spider 3s. We've kind of just watched it launch a bunch of times, and it feels like about the same. I can't say it is some groundbreaking improvement that you hop on this Roadster 4 and all of a sudden all of your launching problems are fixed. I will say, having watched some students launch it at different trim settings, that where you trim it totally changes its inflation characteristic. It totally changes how much it wants to overfly you. When I first got the Roadster 4, I was playing with different trim settings with one of the students that I had flying it. And as we went just past trims neutral, it seemed very overfly happy, had a super deep brake range, had an easy inflation, but you had to be more active in those brakes. We've been trimming it in just below trims neutral, so pulling just past where the trims neutral mark is. And this is where I've kind of found it to be a good spot. You've still got a deep brake range without snapping it into a stall, but it's less inclined to want to just overfly you. The inflation is still easy, everything is still easy, but we have seen it hang back just a little bit more. Some of the feedback that we got from some of the pilots launching it there was that it was hanging back ever so slightly more than the Spider, and that's really just a trimming configuration. Depending on where you put those trims is going to change that. I would say if you're used to that easy inflation of a Spider 3, you're going to get the same easy inflation on this Roadster 4. With that being said, I would rank this Roadster 4 as probably the #1 or close to #1, top 5 easiest launching wings I've flown a paramotor on. Moving forward to the in-flight feel of this Roadster 4. The first thing and the most notable thing are the winglets. Now, these winglets are a super simple concept. Put a piece of drag out, which is going to reduce the roll access. And it does. And the whole goal of these winglets is to reduce the oscillation you experience. If you're unfamiliar with what oscillation is this rocking back and forth that we experience. And as pilots, we have to correct this oscillation the entire flight. It is something you're always working on correcting. And as you become more and more experienced, it becomes second nature and you never really oscillate. You put those winglets out there and you've got a newer pilot coming in on a landing approach. If they're not as good at controlling that oscillation, it is almost as if that Roadster is offering a helping hand and it's helping correct the oscillation. And if you just don't do anything, that oscillation does dampen out and it starts flying straight. I consider the winglets some form of autopilot, meaning if I want to go that way, I just point that way, let go, and we go that way. And although you might think that's how every glider is, it's not how every glider is. Sometimes you point that way and in a couple of seconds, you've got a little oscillation. In 30 seconds, you've got quite a bit of oscillation and it just gets worse and worse. Now, the downside of these winglets is that it does reduce your roll rate. So because they are acting as drag, which is reducing the roll that you experience, you are experiencing less roll. So comparing the Roadster 4 to the Spider 3, you are getting slightly less roll rate. However, even though your roll rate is dampened, I do find the Roadster 4 to be ever so slightly more playful than the Spider 3. Now, this is not the general feedback that other pilots have given me. The newer pilots would probably not say that, but maybe that's because they don't have as much energy management and energy to play with. We'll talk about that more in a second. But when I talk about playfulness, when I talk about it plays a little bit better, I just mean how well does it carve, how well does it stay in a turn, how well does it carry the energy, and how well does it give it to you to use. The Spider 3, Roadster 3, and most beginner gliders are designed to kind of suck the energy out as you're building it. They're designed to pump the brakes, to help you, the inexperienced pilot, not overdo something that can get you in trouble. And the Roadster 4 does this, but it gives you ever so slightly more in terms of this playfulness than the Spider did, than the Roadster 3 did. Meaning, when you go to build up energy, you have just a little bit more energy to play with. When you get that glider rolling and playing, it wants to continue to roll and play a little bit more. It is a playful glider, despite not having this insane roll rate. Now, when I talk about the feedback that other pilots have given me, the more experienced pilot that I've been talking to, that I won't name for his sake, because I didn't ask him if I could, has been telling me the same thing, that he found it to be more playful than the Spider, but roll less than the Spider. And I do want to make sure it's known that those are two separate categories. Now, the newer pilots that I had flying this Roadster 4, these guys don't have any wing over experience. They don't have a ton of energy management experience. They were not going up there and doing barrel rolls. So their feedback was different than his feedback because all they were looking at was roll rate. So you've got to kind of identify these key characteristics that do truly change. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about your brake pressure. Now, this is something that newer pilots may not notice as much. But some gliders have really high brake pressure. Some gliders have really light brake pressure. Essentially, that means how much muscle do you need to pull to get the brakes down to here? And how much do you need to keep the brakes down here? Now, generally speaking, a reflex profile glider is going to have a higher brake pressure, meaning you're going to have to pull harder to get all the way down to the same spot as a classic profile wing. With the Roadster 4, this is still true. Comparing the Roadster 4 to the Kona 3, which is a near identical glider, just a non-reflex classic profile, the Kona 3's brake range is softer than the Roadster 4's, meaning pulling down to, let's say right here, takes a little bit more effort on the Roadster than it does on the Kona. But I wouldn't say there's any difference with the Roadster 4 than there was with the Spider 3 or with the Roadster 3. The pilots that I had flying it were flying Spider 3s primarily, that is their glider, and they didn't notice any difference between the two. Moving on from the brake pressure, I want to talk about speed. Now, we have done no conclusive official speed testing because, to be completely honest, speed isn't the most important thing to me, which is why I don't prioritize getting speed tests, practicing doing speed tests. Now, the hard part with testing speed is where you trim the glider makes a big difference. And I want you to keep in mind that we were trimmed slightly below neutral on the Roadster 4, and we were trimmed exactly at neutral on the Spider 3. And we should have put them at the same spot, but we didn't think of it until afterwards. With that in mind, the pilot that we had flying, that weighs about 150 pounds on a Parajet Maverick with a Moster 185 and a 140 reserve, so you have some understanding of his weight, was doing about 25 miles an hour on his Spider 3. Now that's fairly slow, to be completely honest with you, but keep in mind, these are newer pilots on beginner gliders, and he's somewhat light on both of these wings. On the Roadster 4, he was doing the exact same 25 miles an hour. Now, this was not just one flight in one direction. This was across 6 or so different flights in a variety of different directions, testing this speed. So my conclusion of the Roadster 4 speed difference from the Spider 3 and the Roadster 3 is, I don't think there's much of a difference. I do think had we trimmed that Roadster 4 out to trims neutral, we might have gotten 1, maybe 2 miles an hour more speed out of it at trims neutral. And I really should have tested the trims all the way in speed and the trims all the way out speed, as well as the speed bar speed, but I didn't. And again, I don't find speed as the most important characteristics when it comes to testing a new pilot wing, a ENB certified beginner glider. So moving on from speed, I want to talk about landing. Great flare authority. Great brake pressure, great set down, nice speed. It doesn't just stall out of the sky. All around, I'd say it's basically identical to the Roadster 3 and the Spider 3. I can't say there are any real differences. So in a good way, it is still everything that was great about the Roadster 3, the Spider 3. And in a honest way, it wasn't really anything different. The notable differences between the Roadster 4 and the Roadster 3 are the winglets, which dampened oscillation, the ever so slightly increased playfulness, the ever so slightly easier launches. Those are the only real notable changes that I have identified in my testing of this Roadster 4, and I've been flying these for a couple of months. I've had half a dozen or so of them. It is actually looking like it's going to be one of my personal wings. I loved the 24 Roadster 4 so much so that I think I'm going to keep it for myself to fly and replace my Kona 3, which has historically been one of my wings in the quiver. For those of you that are curious about brake lengths, I have changed the toggles, I have played with brake lengths and tip steer lengths, and I'm gonna be honest, the brake lengths were perfect from the factory. I did not change the brake lengths at all. The tip steering, I did shorten roughly 3 to 4 inches from stock length. So keep that in mind when you're shortening your brakes, when you're shortening your tip steer, that all I have done is shorten the tip steer 3 to 4 inches, and it was perfect. All right, guys, with all of that in mind, I want to roll this right into the interviews. These are 3 different interviews with 3 different pilots, all at different skill levels, flying different gliders. Let's get right into that. All right, guys, we are here with Taylor. Excuse the goggles, it is super bright out here. Taylor's been flying for about a year. He's got, what, roughly 30 hours
Somewhere in
or
there,
so,
yeah.
something like that?
Yeah.
So he's a relatively new pilot. Your primary glider is the Ozone Spider 3 24 meter.
Yes.
You've been flying the Roadster 4 24 meter for the last 2 days. You've gotten quite a bit of flights back and forth between the two, and I wanted to hear some of your feedback on the difference between the two.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into the launching characteristics between the Roadster 4 and the Spider 3. Talk to me. Do you notice any difference? How's the inflation, brake range, distance, all of that?
Inflation honestly seems pretty similar. I'd say it honestly gets up and stays stable as I'm trying to run and get going. So it seems pretty similar as far as the launching characteristics. Not a whole ton different there.
So in a great way, it feels just like the Spider 3 did.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Does it feel like it inflates any easier or harder than the Spider 3?
No, it doesn't seem harder than the Spider 3. It
Like,
seems,
doesn't feel any difference launching one versus the other?
it really feels pretty similar to launching the Spider 3.
Okay. Does it feel like it tries to overfly you more? Does it feel like it tries to sag back more? You feel like you got the same brake range?
If anything, I'd say it feels like it maybe sags back just a little bit more. As far as brake range, though, it might need a little bit more. It's a little bit more mushy on the brakes. And so I noticed on my Spider 3, when I pull it, it'll go a little bit quicker. This one, I need a little bit more brakes to move it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about in-flight feel. How does the roll rate feel, oscillation, efficiency, just all things related to in-flight?
Sure. In flight, I'd say that the roll rate definitely has slowed down a lot. if you, turn and build up an oscillation, it'll correct itself a little bit easier. It's like a autopilot almost. It'll just correct itself a little bit smooth, whereas the Spider will have to, do more active correction to get the oscillation under control from trying to come in for a landing and just up its more turbulence. So.
Okay. So the winglets
Yeah.
dampen your roll rate in
Yeah.
a good way and in a not as good way, in the sense that you don't turn as sharp as easily, but it cancels out oscillation and tracks a little straighter.
It does, yeah. I'd say if I was going to try and carve around and do something crazy, it'd probably be a little bit harder. But as far as, correcting it, that makes it nice. They don't really have to think about it a lot. It just, coming out of a turn, oh, we're already stable.
Perfect.
Already ready to go before you think about it.
Autopilot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like your brake range is as hard, as soft, the same, or different? Meaning, when you go and pull brake, is it a heavier, harder pull overall? Is it a lighter pull overall?
It's definitely a little bit lighter of a pull, so you need to pull a little bit more, maybe an inch or two more to get probably the same effect that I saw from the Spider.
Okay. How about the landing characteristics? How's the flare authority? How's your descent rate? How's your set down speed? All things related to the landing.
Yeah, landing I'd say is honestly very similar. Again, the biggest thing I noticed coming in is there's less of that correction for oscillation, which I love. That's a big thing. Sometimes I overthink it. I'll be coming in on the Spider 3 and I'm oscillating a little bit, want to do another go around. So when I'm coming in on it, we're already stable. I feel confident enough that I can just plant that landing.
Awesome. So it feels like your flare authority is very similar. You're not like suddenly lifting off the ground because you have so much more flare authority, but like sinking into the ground.
Yeah, I'd say flare authority is honestly very similar. I mean, maybe a slight bit more is needed to pull the same flare for the Spider, but I think it's pretty similar.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about speed. We've been tracking your average speed on your Spider, tracking the average speed on the Roadster. Tell me, was there any difference there? How fast are you on your Roadster? How fast are you on your Spider?
On my Roadster, or on my Spider, I'm going 24 almost across the board all the time. Sometimes it'll peak up to averaging 25, sometimes a little bit lower. I think one time it hit 23, but it's right around the 24, 25 mark. So I was curious to see, wow, this one, with the oscillation dampening a little bit, maybe it'll slow me down a little bit, but it was just about the same. Looking on Gaggle and tracking, several flights as we've been out here several days on the Roadster, my average speed has been 24 as well.
So what you're saying is your Spider 3 24 cruises about 24 miles an hour.
Yeah. Yep.
My Roadster 4 that you've been flying has also been cruising at 24 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So the speed between the Spider and the Roadster is the same.
Just about the same, yep.
And keep that in mind with those speed tests. That was nothing like super extensive or conclusive. That was just Taylor's average flying around, both at trims neutral on the Roadster, on the Spider. And I maybe had you trimmed just a little in from neutral. We could have maybe trimmed the Roadster out a touch more.
Yeah.
That's probably why it's feeling slightly saggier, or like it hangs back a little bit more, and like it's a little squishier. And that might give you 1 or 2 miles an hour more speed. But to me, it's feeling like this Roadster 4, the Spider 3 are flying at about the same speed.
Yeah, yep, they definitely seem to fly about the same speed. There's, not a whole ton difference there as far as my cruising speed.
Cool. Well, hey, Taylor, thank you very much for your thoughts on the new Ozone Roadster 4. All right, guys, we are here with Austin. Austin is a brand new pilot. He's been flying for about 1 month. He just finished up his beginner training here with us at Backcountry PPG. I think he has 13 flights?
13.
Sweet. I wanted Austin's opinion because in his class, he flew the Ozone Mojo Power 2. And he just switched over to the Roadster 4. And I wanted to get kind of his feedback on the difference between the Mojo and the Roadster. So let's just jump straight into it. What was it like launching the Roadster versus launching the Mojo?
I would say the main difference was when I would take off, it was just faster inflation. Maybe I didn't notice the inflation so much, but getting off the ground was like 10 steps versus Mojo maybe felt like I was running further.
Okay, so my interpretation of that was maybe it inflated just a little bit easier, and then you got off the ground faster.
Yeah, notably, like way faster.
Okay, way faster. Okay. Did you feel like your brake range was similar, squishy, firm, hard, deep, shallow? Any difference with the brakes?
Still, I mean, it still felt pretty pretty close to the same. Maybe at the beginning it's a little softer, and then you got to pull harder.
Okay. Do you feel like when you were getting really deep, was it any firmer than it was on the Mojo?
On the Mojo. No, it's like the same. Brakes almost feel the same.
Okay. So in flight, was there anything that you really noticed? I mean, you're not doing any level of aggressive turns or anything.
True.
But talk to me a little bit about the in-flight feel.
Well, I mean, like compared to the Mojo, I like with the Roadster, it's got the winglets, so I wanted to try and oscillate a little bit, and so I would turn, and man, it would just like, even as a beginner, it just would go
Correct
back
for
straight
you?
for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what you need to do all the time, but
Whereas the Mojo is notorious, dude, for just like
yeah,
terrible oscillation.
I'd have to like back and forth till I'd get straight.
Yeah,
Versus
yeah,
this
yeah.
one, after like 3 little swings, it just went straight.
levels itself out.
Yeah.
You played with your trims on this last flight.
Yep.
Talk to me about how it was to pull those trims in, trims out. What did that feel like?
Oh, I mean, I haven't used any other trims, but it was easy. You were like pulling trims. I'm like, I've never done it. All right, and just pulled them down like you do it just one and then the other,
Yeah.
and then I let them back to neutral.
Was it easy to kind of get them right to neutral, or did they want to like jump all the way out and then you have to pull back in?
No, they almost want to just go right to neutral and then almost like push it again to go up.
Okay. Sweet. As far as roll rate goes, aka how easy is it to get it to roll and how easy does it roll?
Yep.
Did you notice much of a difference from the Mojo?
I actually did. As I've been getting more comfortable too, it turns a lot easier.
Okay.
Especially like if faster too. Maybe not easier, but faster.
So what you're saying is that it was easier to get the wing to turn faster.
Yeah.
So you're getting more turn for the less
same
effort,
pull,
for
yeah.
The same pull.
For the same, yeah.
Okay. As far as the landing goes, you've landed with it twice now.
Yes.
One of them was like a borderline downwind, super fast landing. One of them was in a little bit of wind. Talk to me about those two landings.
Yeah, the one in the wind was like the softest landing I've had so far. It was like just
Dude, it was so
foot drag and stop. Then the other one, and maybe I wasn't landing perfect wind. It was pretty fast.
It was fast.
But I still landed on my feet. So far with the Roadster, always landed on my feet. Mojo, not as much, but still good.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So out of the comparison between the two, I mean, what really stands out?
I mean, the biggest thing is the oscillating, especially coming in for landing or just coming out of a turn.
Yeah.
It would just go straight. But then when you turn, it wouldn't like fight to go straight,
Yeah.
maybe I thought it would.
So what you're saying is that if you get a little oscillation, it likes to catch it. But when you actually want to grab those brakes and get it to turn,
Yeah,
it
it'll give
still
it, yeah.
goes. Okay.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Cool. Well, hey, Austin, thank you so much for your thoughts on the Ozone Roadster 4. All right, guys, we are here with Steven. He's got roughly 50 flights, somewhere around the 30-hour mark, and his primary flying glider is an Ozone Spider 3 24 meter. This morning, Steven, you flew the brand new Ozone Roadster 4 24 meter. Talk to me a little bit about how that went.
So yeah, as we were talking about before, I really think the Roadster is basically just a Spider with winglets. It definitely feels a little bit more locked in. If I went hands off and on cruise control, I felt a little more confident that it would stay straight without having to weight shift too much and compensate for that. And to be honest, it's just really good for those sort of straightaway sections if you just want to go hands off and cruise. I will say, in my experience, I believe that the Spider does have a little bit better roll rate and it does fly slightly more dynamically if that's what you're into.
Thank you for that first impression. Let's deep dive a little bit further into certain aspects. You've done how many different launches? Because you guys had some rough wind this morning. I mean, you tried what, 4 or 5 times? Talk to me about the launching characteristics. How's the inflation? How's the brake range? Does it stall? Does it try to overfly you?
What I noticed with the Roadster, for me at least, it seemed like it wanted to fly a little bit more behind me for the same amount of brake pull. So I had to kind of adjust what I was doing there versus the Spider. But the people who were watching say that it seemed to inflate better actually. So I think that's really more down to just me being more confident on the Spider due to the hours I have on it. But I would say that they launch pretty much the same and you're gonna be fine with either one you get.
So didn't notice too much of a difference between the two, in all honesty.
No, not really.
So talk to me a little bit about the in-flight feel. How is the roll rate, the oscillation, brake pressure, all the things that go with in-flight? Talk to me about the difference between the Spider 3 and the Roadster 4.
Like I said, the Spider does roll a little bit faster, a little bit more dynamically, but the Roadster does seem to be a little more locked in. So when you do pull some brake and you are trying to roll a little bit, you're gonna have to pull a little bit more than on the Spider, but honestly, it feels pretty similar. So you're basically just gonna adjust your flying style to the wing, and you're not really gonna notice much of a difference, if you ask me. As far as the brake input, it seems like we had the brakes adjusted about the same length. We both had game changer toggles on both of the wings, and we both had tip steer tied in. With all that considered, I would say that brake feel is almost exactly identical, and that's about what I would expect, to be honest, since it is basically the same wing.
So basically what you're saying is you feel like the Spider 3 rolls a little bit better. Roadster 4 dampens that oscillation a little bit better, tracks a little bit straighter, and as you say, is a little more locked in. Brake pressure feels about the same. Everything else feels about the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically the same, but I would almost say if you're a beginner and you're in this kind of a wing range anyways, if you see yourself trying to do a little bit more XC stuff, the Roadster might be a better option.
Awesome. Talk to me a little bit about the landing. Did you notice any difference with your flare authority, how effective it was, how fast you were setting down, how deep the brakes were? Any difference between those two wings?
I would say if anything, it felt like I had just a little bit more flare authority with the Roadster. Not really enough to make that much of a difference. I was doing foot drag landings with both of them, and it was honestly pretty identical. So I don't really think there's a big difference there.
Okay. Well, hey, Steven, thank you so much for your input on the brand new Ozone Roadster 4. Awesome, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed those interviews, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're looking at getting into an Ozone Roadster 4, hopefully this was helpful in guiding you into your next glider. I do think all around, if you're coming off something like a MACFLY, a Mojo, or you're just getting into paramotoring, leaving a training school, just starting to fly, that the Roadster 4 is a great option. If you're on something like a Roadster 3 or a Spider 3, I don't think I would make the change. It is not a big enough change from those gliders to justify spending the additional money. Chances are, in a year or two, you'll be ready to jump to something like the Sirocco or the Viper, in which case that wouldn't have been a necessary step. With all of that being said, I do have over a dozen Ozone Roadster 4s in stock in a variety of different sizes and colors. We are now Ozone importers, and I'm grateful to be a part of the Ozone community on a larger level. If you're interested in getting your very own Roadster 4, visit backcountryppg.com for more information. If you've got questions and you want to ask me my thoughts, give me a call at 801-599-1684. With all of that being said, hit the like button, subscribe button, and I will see you all in the next video.